welcome to this recording. Welcome to this podcast. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. Glad to be here.
Yes. I'm so happy that you're here. And now I know proper pronunciation of your name, Askew, right? Nic Askew.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah.
That's difficult surname.
It is, yeah. It can be pronounced kind of 3 ways, maybe 4 ways.
Yeah. So for people who don't know Nic, we already recorded Instagram Live, and I'm happy to report it was greatly received and people loved it. And we're just going to continue in the same trajectory. And just quick introduction, usually I do this like, ta-da, introduction. I really, drum the trumpet that I introduce people in such an amazing way. But, I'll be a little bit calmer today with Nic. So he is a documentary filmmaker. He is a leadership development consultant. He is a coach. He is somebody who is deeply curious about human beingness. He is somebody that has, at one point in time, decided to use his camera to capture the essence of human presence. And this is what really drew me into conversation with Nic, because I love the essence of human presence. Sometimes when I teach my courses in coaching, we go deeper into the content. We all talk about the soul, about this essential part of ourselves, that unique part of us that makes us who we are, that aspect of ourselves that we know when we look into each other's eyes, when we look beyond our sight, into depth of our existence. And I love that Nic has managed to capture that so well in his acclaimed Soul Biographies Film Series. And we're going to reference all of this for you to see. And also, Nic has his own methods. He's teaching coaches how to become better coaches. He's teaching leaders how to become better leaders through his interview methodology as well. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. And then let's see what emerges, because I really want to follow Nic's flow and follow his way of unfolding conversation, which is educational in itself. So today is going to be something beautiful and special, and we invited Nic to help us kick off our fall season. And I'm really grateful for Nic to be here with us today. So welcome once again.
Thank you. Yeah, I was listening to your description. It's always strange hearing a description. I know my work, what I do in the world with my camera is essentially, the experience is utterly beyond words. It's ineffable. And I've always had a trouble describing it, as have pretty much everyone else who's ever been in front of the camera. And I've probably had trouble describing myself as well. I suppose I work in lots of arenas. I suppose I'm an artist in a way. And I was trying to think how to describe it again. I should probably just give up on that one. Call myself an artist and be done. I wander the world, and I just somehow noticed how to see people, but not through the act of sight, but through the non-act of awareness, really. I was thinking this morning, actually, I got up and thought, I wonder what we'll talk about. And I was struck by this quote that I've heard referenced to Einstein. And it's been referenced in various ways, but I think it goes something along the lines of, we can't hope to solve our problems with the same thinking that created them in the first place.
Yeah.
And some people reference it as the same level of consciousness, but let's stick with thinking. What I noticed through having sat utterly still with thousands of people over the last couple of decades with the camera is that is a totally agreeable quotation. You hear it and you go, well, of course. But the impulse is then to think better. Well, let's be smarter about this. Let's study the nature of thought. Let's study the nature of the mind. But I'm not sure that's what he was alluding to, having a sense of what Einstein had actually stumbled upon. You see, thinking better, thinking smarter, controlling one's mind is still your mind. And a human mind is separate. It's your mind, it's my mind. That's where the human world has been constructed. It's a thing. It's an existence of the mind. Everything has been thought out, acted on, made. Where I think everything changes is not of the mind. It's almost like of a universal mind. And I think that's what he was probably alluding to. And right. There should have been a second part to that. And what I've noticed very starkly, I love looking at patterns, because there's this obvious, after a while, there was this very obvious pattern in making film. And when I say making film, I mean paying utter, undivided and so still attention to someone, where I would sit with someone and I had this rather unusual way of filming. In fact, it's entirely unusual because it's antithetical to everything. A normal documentary filmmaker would sit with someone and ask someone a question. Or they have a whole list of questions, because what you want to get is you want to get something out of someone, something good, something that will contribute to the film, to the world, to something. But when you ask someone a question, the origin point from where the answer comes from is here. It's the mind. That's the normal human encounter, is mind to mind. So that's our experience. But what I noticed really early on was that words come from one of two places. They come from someone to someone. So from my mind to your mind. You ask me a question, let's go down a track, let's see if we can work it out. And it's almost like ping pong. You ask me a question, I give you an answer, and vice versa. And when I looked at film edits, it was very obvious where that was the case. It's just a normal human encounter. But then there comes a point, and what I was good at was nothing. And what I mean by that is I wouldn't go into film someone with any questions whatsoever, because I wasn't looking for anything, which sounds strange, but there was just nothing. Everything came from a stillness. So it always starts, and right from the get-go. And that's what I would do. Occasionally in the early days, I'd get a bit nervous and ask a question, but then I could see in the edit, it went straight to the head. And what I got was the story of someone, almost the invented story of someone. And that wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for this deep interior sense of someone, and that wasn't contained in the words that were spoken at me. So from a stillness, words come from somewhere entirely different. They emerge almost. So how it can look when one is filming is, and I usually film in an atmosphere where there's a whole lot of people watching. It can be 10 people in a room if I'm teaching something, or it could be 1,000 people in an auditorium, but the image from the camera is projected onto large screens, so you can't not see what's going on. And I film in black and white, hence me being in black and white today. High contrast, stark black and white, usually against a black background. It's quite dramatic, but what it leaves no question of is who someone is and what's there. So someone will wander up to the camera and usually expecting a question or a warm-up or something. And it's just nothing. I just learned. I didn't learn, actually. I don't know how it happened in the first place. I just kind of sat there. There were no questions. And then out of that stillness came something. In fact, one of the first guys that really noticed what happened was a guy called Tim Galway, who's well known in coaching circles, and he's one of my he's one of my dearest friends, and we speak for huge amounts of time. Last telephone call was over 7 hours.
Oh,
can you imagine?
A long conversation.
Oh yeah. So anyway, so the first time I meet him, he was working at Rolls-Royce in England, and I was introduced to him by someone called Sir John Whitmore, who was a well-known coach, and he'd been one of my subjects in the early days. And he said, "Oh, you've got to have Tim in front of your camera. I'll make a call." So I turn up there. I don't know whether he'd been told who I was, but he thought I was a journalist. So he just kind of sat down and he was waiting for these questions. And then he was waiting. And then he realized, oh, I see. Like you're not a journalist. And then we just kind of sat there. And then immediately what came was a revealing of him. There was a point at which what came from him wasn't of his mind. He wasn't trying to say something useful to the world, teach someone about his inner game or anything like that. He'd let go of all of that. And the origin point of his words changed to the place I believe Einstein might have been alluding to. And he said, you can't change, you can't hope to solve the predicaments, the problems of humankind from the same level of thinking. And I think what he means and what I noticed was there is this larger universal mind that we're all part of without condition. And it's a very, very simple thing to see that in someone if you're still. And so over years and years and years of just seeing this evidence time and time again, it just came down to, well, it's really utterly simple that you could ever imagine. You just sit with someone, you start with nothing, by which I mean no act at all. And there's a subtlety in that. And then you just let it. You let the experience unfold. So what you experience of someone emerges and finds you, where we're actually used to being the one at the center, seeing. But when you sit and you believe that my job is, if I believe my job is to see you, what I end up doing is I see you through my mind and I see my conclusion of you. That's not deep. That's not interior. That's not the soul. We've missed something really important. But if I were to let the experience of you find me, just kind of emerge, almost like the experience of music that needs nothing done with it. There's a liberation to that. That's I imagine is what is right at the heart of coaching when it's done well. Like I remembered years ago, I did the opening keynote for a big International Coaching Federation event in Washington, D.C. And I remember not quite knowing what I was going to say, but my first sentence was, I thought I was going to be booed off stage. I said something along the lines of, I don't quite know why coaching exists, because I don't know whether you're saints or the entire opposite. Because it seems like what you're doing at the heart of it is just what we should do with each other anyway. Pay this undivided attention without interference. But it just seems that the world doesn't really have that embedded in the way we are. We just enculturated to, always be pushing, always be that. There's no space. There's no stillness. And it would seem that at the heart of coaching is that. And like an innate understanding that if you're still with someone and you set everything down, that person will recognize the fact that they are okay. They are connected to it all without condition. And I think that's really important to notice. And there are moments of that. And then there are moments when one gets in the way. And that's really subtle. When I show people this, as you alluded to, this interview method, and the irony is, the method is there is no method because it's nothing. But nothing is subtle. Nothing conscious. It's kind of obvious that nothing might include not speaking much. But it's not subtle that the goings on of the machinations of your mind is something and gets in the way. And I've noticed this time and time again, if I'm trying to direct with my mind, without even saying it out loud, that has a profound impact on the person. There is no freedom. And I see this time and time again where when I'm showing people, I get someone in my chair behind or by the side of the camera, and someone is witnessing this emotion coming out, and they're reacting to it. Part of it's not reacting, the art of not reacting to this, because it's not your job. The witness is not you. The witness is the field, is the conscious field, is presence. That's what it is. You just get in the way. So when someone then becomes compassionate with that person because of the reaction to what's happening, that closes it down. I've seen it many times, and people say it. It's like, I didn't ask for compassion. That's lovely that you noticed and stuff, but I didn't ask for it, and it shrunk me. So this nothing is subtle, yet it's very, very simple. Anyway, so I suppose that's a very, very long, winded way of saying there are two origin points. And I think in other words, there's the mind, and then there's the not mind, which is probably a universal mind to which we're all connected. And what I see in the world, with my place with my camera, where I tend to get called in to make films of people and endeavors and movements that have been caused to act from this other place, this universal mind, on behalf of all, really, not on behalf of, an individual organization seeking to, to dominate a market or anything like that. But this other kind of work, there is a lot of work that is caused to act from this other origin point, from this sense of universal mind almost. And I imagine that exists in coaching, and all the various shades of coaching, how coaching turns up in people and in groups of people. Right. Yeah.
When we recorded the Instagram lives, there were a lot of questions, in the chat. And one of the questions that people ask again and again and again that I would love to open up so we can just deepen our conversation is, how did you manage to achieve that level of stillness and silence inside of yourself when you can be that pure witness? How did you manage to overcome in your own life the chatter of your mind, the thoughts, the ego that needs to say something or set the stage? What was your journey in arriving to that point when you can hold that space?
I'll jump to the conclusion. No, not to the conclusion, to an answer to the holding space. Space doesn't need to be held, by the way. Mm-hmm. And this is really, it's kind of incendiary, mm-hmm. but it's true. So I'm sitting, I will answer your question, by the way, because it is fascinating, and I think it'll be useful, and probably to me. But I was sitting in somewhere in the world, I can't remember exactly where, and there's a bunch of people, and I'm attempting to show them this, and the way to teach it is not to teach it because it's innate. You just you go with nothing, because the best way to learn something is to notice what's happening yourself. And someone is in front of the camera, and we've had a few days of this, and their image is projected onto a big screen, and everyone's kind of watching intently, because it's haunting in a way. When you see presence in someone and it's so still, and this girl goes, "Got it, I've just got to be." And I remember going, "Oh, no, you don't got to be. being's just another verb. You don't need to do that. And then there was this massive relief. And then she said, oh, so you're just really good at holding space. I went, oh, no, space doesn't need to be held. Not by you, certainly not by me. In fact, space is what we're sitting in, and space is what we're part of, without condition, always were. You don't even need to hold it. And then there's just this other level. And what I think I was trying to point to is the fact that there is nothing that's required. And you can experiment with it. You just said, and there's nothing required. In fact, for a couple of years, I used to say this rather bizarre thing, and I didn't even think about it, but it was always caught on camera. I wasn't mic'd up, but I could hear it. And no one thought to ask me for a couple of years, actually, what on earth what did I mean? And what I found myself saying was, there's nothing to do and there's no one to do it.
Right.
And I'll just leave you to think about that. But if I go back to you asked the question, well, how can you be so still? I think, well, firstly, I think I came in with it. I always saw this, when I was young, I saw this. I didn't know that's what I was seeing. And it didn't seem to fit the world. I had no context, so I wasn't a part of anything that would give me any indication of any of this. Like I think many people, especially maybe even in the coaching profession, I think it's probably riddled with, dominated by people who saw something early on, couldn't make sense of it, went to work in what you call the real world, the world constructed by the mind, and realized, there's this call to something else. And then I realized what I was looking at. It's like, I couldn't make sense of it. And then I suppose I did many things. I started out as an explorer at a college. I canoed the Congo and the Amazon and crossed the Sahara and climbed mountains and stuff. Did that. I made life up as I went along, or it made me up, more to the point. Sitting there, nothing. Idea comes in about something wild. Oh, right, I got a sense of that. I'll do that. Don't know where it's come from, but it just arrived. That's how I picked up the camera, sitting utterly still in a hotel in London, doing nothing. And I mean nothing, just a stillness. One moment it was not there, and the next moment it was there, but it wasn't caused by anything physical. It just kind of emerged out of nothing, which I've come to understand is actually the creative sense of all of life. Out of nothing comes something. We just think we cause everything. How full of it is that? It's like, we think we have a life and we live it, and we push it, and we live it as best we can, and we're always looking for advice and stuff, and we're always trying to reach higher end stuff. When all along I have an idea that was life was trying to live itself through us. That's an observation. So then I pick a camera up, and so now I've got 20 years of sitting very still with people and noticing things. And I've noticed the nature of stillness. And really what it is it's subtraction. It's the subtraction of everything, really. Not the addition, which I think is probably where, when you're a coach or you're something in that realm, with our enculturated habits of thinking we're the ones doing life, then acquisition is quite a thing. Like, well, I've got to learn more because then I'll become better and whatever. But it's actually it's the opposite, because you're not the one doing it. So it's your absence which allows life to do itself, to do you almost. And so what I noticed was all sorts of things. I would notice in film edits, when I started to, get involved, someone would just shrink away. I would notice Even my unconscious, unspoken reaction to something would mean someone closed down. In other words, their personality came back up, and I didn't want to see that. So I noticed all the nuance of this, and I noticed that stillness was a very, very simple thing. And it doesn't have to last forever, but in a moment, it's particularly simple. So I found when someone walked up to the camera, all I would really say is, people would usually close their eyes because I love catching that image, and the light would be flooding through a window, just lighting one side of their face. So I am kind of an artist, I guess, in that respect. I love to get the image looking just like I know it could. And I'd usually just say to someone, well, you know what? If you just sit here and you don't speak, let alone even open your eyes, and we just sit here till the end of time, I think that will be enough. Actually, because I know that will be enough. Because I don't even know what I'm looking for, because I'm not actually looking for anything. I just understood the nature of things, that actually it was looking for me. So I think Rumi was rumored to have said that one, what you seek is seeking you. What if that was the case? Maybe we could set down our compulsion to always be learning something, because learning something fills the mind. Back to Einstein's piece, maybe everything is the other way around. Maybe really life is seeking to live itself through us. Maybe we could construct a world which includes everyone if we didn't construct it of the mind, I'd say self-centered mind, this mind that is ourselves, looking out for ourselves or just the people around us. If this universal mind, in other words, this kind of intuitive intelligence took hold of us, so people were inspired from that place to affect all the systemic things in the world and cause us to act in particular ways, that would be an amazing thing. And I think that comes from stillness. And I think the stillness, it doesn't need anything. It's the absence of everything. So it doesn't even need meditation. I mean, I guess that can be helpful. Anything can be helpful, but it doesn't need anything. And I do believe that people experience this all the time. Every day there's a moment, at least a moment. Doesn't matter how fraught you are or depressed you are or whatever. There must be a moment in a 24 hours where there's nothing. You're not trying to work something out. You're just kind of sat there in full attention to whatever's around you. So it's not a complex thing. So how did I come by it? I always saw it. I never felt separate. Well, that's weird. But I didn't know that's what it was. And then suddenly I caught sight of the fact that people thought they were separate, and I realized why people hurt. I didn't know what to do with that one, but maybe a year later I picked up the camera and it kind of became kind of clear. But what I knew to be true is that there is no one that's not included in this. There is no separation. Connection simply exists. It's just we didn't notice it. Just there's something in the way. And the only way one can notice it seems to be in a moment of stillness. Then everything that was in the way just kind of goes, and you go, oh. And so my films, I hope, at least they stand a chance of someone paying attention to this character on film, or if we're doing it in a room, on the screen in the room, and you suddenly realize you're looking into a reflection. You realize that we belong to each other, that there is one thing, but you've had an experience. And I think it's haunting, and it can reverberate through your days from then on, because you saw something that you can't unsee. In other words, you became aware that in a moment of stillness, you suddenly notice what was always there. And that's like often when someone's in front of the camera, and they're in front of the camera for different things. Sometimes I'm making a film, often I'm not. Often it's for the sheer unbridled experience of nothing, of becoming aware almost. And there'll be someone in front of a camera, and there's obviously something in the way. There's something traumatic. Something's happened. Life is traumatic. Can be, and often is. We hold so much stuff. And I think the normal human reaction to a life that doesn't seem like the one you want is to do something about it. The normal human pattern, I think, is to, let's understand it, understand where it came from, understand the nature of it, so that we can do something, so that we can change it. But who ever thought just to sit with it? Well, a number of people have over the ages, I'm sure. But generally what I would do is I just kind of sit with it. It's like, and knowing that I don't have to do anything about it. It's not my job to do anything about it. Just not even react to it. And then maybe it takes a bit of practice, and I do practice a lot because of the nature of what I do. But it's a very simple thing. And I know it's a very simple thing because I will get people to sit where I'm doing, where I sit, and then they do it. And the same thing happens. There's this kind of liberation, and whatever was in the way seems to fall away. And the question is, well, what were we doing? And the answer is nothing. Right. That's kind of like, really? That kind of puts, as they say, the cat amongst the pigeons. I thought we were always working towards something. I thought we were always trying to reach higher, or, to gain a greater understanding. And there's a place for that. But with respect to human connectedness and almost like interior capacity, what if we were just traveling the wrong direction? What if all our endeavors to transform took us further away from realizing what we were? So directionally, it was the opposite. And so, back to the question of how does one be still? Well, you do nothing. And I suppose there's a part where you become aware of what you're doing, and that can be subtle. There are obvious things. Talk a lot, like me now. But I suppose I'm the object of a podcast, so I have to say something. But I don't. We could just kind of sit here and not. My record's an hour and 47 minutes with someone in front of the camera and not a single word said. Can you imagine? Beamed up, about 100 people in the room. Terrifying. And then not. So I don't usually, when I'm behind the camera, I don't usually say much, if anything. Suppose that's how you know. So, how does one be still? Well, give it a go and just sit there, and then it, the first part is probably quite difficult. I find it really easy with people. I remember this guy comes along once, and his observation was, he sat in nature a lot. He just said it's so peaceful. And the observation was, well, because nature doesn't want anything of you. Doesn't need anything of you. And he said, but sitting with people in this way, like what I call inner view, he said it's the same, but it's with people. And there's a big clue in there. If you don't want anything of this moment with someone, if you're not, and I suppose this is the big predicament of coaches, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because you have an agreement with someone, and it's usually in the context of the physical world to move from here to there.
There. Yeah.
So how? But what really works what really works is to allow someone the freedom to go to a place where they realize they're all right and they have access to an awful lot more than they thought. And the way to that is nothing, is clear space. But if you have any kind of intention, any kind of desire of that time, like you're kind of just saying, right, I really want you to get better or to become this, or even to be your true self, or whatever, however you phrase it, that's almost a moment of, I was going to say violence, like a thought that argues with what is here. So nothing would seem to, for a moment anyway, nothing would seem to be a better approach. And so you could just experiment with it, I guess. You just sit and go, well, what if I'll just let the experience of you come to me? And maybe we sit here and in our, whatever it is, 30-minute, 55-minute session, whatever people do, what if, just 10 words were said in the entire time? Would that be okay? That if we just hand over the control of it almost to something else, if we realize that the origin point of important things is not us. Bingo. That's, that bingo. That's, that's it. I mean, that's the leap of awareness that I think the world might deserve, is just that, is a realizing that the cause of life is life and not us. So what if we were to let life live us? What would you become aware? What could you not do? What would fill your bones? But clear space, a stillness is kind of like the only place one becomes aware of that, because if it's not that, you've got your mind going, and your mind just has all this desire born of what it's led itself to believe and what it sees. I mean, that's how we're blind to people, by the way. I think I've come up with all sorts of observations, and I usually encode them into poetry because I don't want to point right to it. Because if I point to something, then people are looking at my finger and not what I'm pointing to. And I came up with this idea, this observation of the space between any two people. And I found myself, sometimes I'd be filming, but I'd be kind of going like this out of my chair. And I just thought that was kind of strange. And what I realized was I was trying to see someone over something. And I realized the space between us looked like it was clear, but it was full of the metaphysical, the things that you couldn't touch and you couldn't see and you might not even notice. But what they were really full of, ostensibly, was our opinions born of what we'd led ourselves to believe. So I'm sitting with a person, this, that, whatever. So immediately this act of seeing is through a lens of opinion, which is most probably wrong. And the needs that I bring to it and the needs that the other person bring to it. So in filmmaking, it's kind of obvious. As a filmmaker, could be going, I don't, but it's like, wow, I really want to get a good story out of this person so I can make a great film. And so I have this need for performance, this kind of performative experience. That puts an immense amount of pressure, and I'm blind to this person. And I can just see that. Like as a coach, I imagine you're seeing a better version of someone. That's it's imprisoning. And the other way around as well. The person in front of the camera, the person in front of the camera is probably thinking, God, I hope I better put my best self on, because this is going to be recorded and it might be seen forever. I better hold the right me up. And that's imprisoning. So I can't see you. Through the space between us is totally opaque. It's full of things that I didn't realize were there. But you become aware that they're there, and it's very easy to let them just sit down, just for a moment. You only need a moment, just in a still moment between two people. And it must happen all the time. And then you notice it can change everything, I think, because what you've done is you've had an experience which you can't necessarily explain, but you've had an experience where you've seen someone, you've realized that you belong to this, to each other, to the same thing. You've had this experience of a unitive place, of the place that people talk about and sing about and write about. One, we're all one, which is an entirely frustrating idea, lovely idea, but frustrating if you don't experience it. But between any two people, you can experience it, and it's really simple. Start with nothing, no thing, no act on your part or my part, and let it. Let the experience of you find me, and the other way around. So there's no more complex than that. Add other things into it, and we're blind to each other. And we're blind to all the sense of what we could be doing. Like this. So maybe it's binary. Like God, it seems like a long time ago, I've lost sense of time. I couldn't remember a single word I said on that Instagram thing, by the way. That's the nature of it, like.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So but I think it's binary. I think my observation of words only come from one or two places. They're spoken by someone to someone. That's normal. Or it's as if that all falls away and the person is being spoken through. Words are just coming through them. They have no idea where the sentence is going to end, let alone what's on the far side of the full stop or the period. They have no idea. It's just coming through them. It's a stream of consciousness. The origin point is totally different. And then, of course, it's all of life, if you were to let it. So you might as well let it, or at least experiment with that. There's things that just, they're distant, but they are there. It's like, I know I've got to do that. It's not quite formed yet, but I know. And what it indicates to me, I think, is that we are not what we seem. That we're part of something that maybe we can't put our fingers on, but we're all part of it. And that causes someone to act in a very different way. And I think that's probably what the world deserves. What even the world is moving towards, because there are an awful lot of people who, whether they can explain it or not, are being caused to act in this way. Coaches often as well, the impulse to go into something, to sit still, pay attention to someone in service of something, has to be caused, not always perhaps, but has to be caused by something greater than ourselves. There's a lot of things that are caused by something greater than ourselves, something that is not only greater than ourselves, but we're a part of.
Yeah. And we're going to leave the audience to feel into that, to sense that. Thank you, Nic. This 50 minutes for just 1 second.
Is that what? Wow. Thank you. Yeah. God, I've talked a lot.
Thank you so much. Yeah. No, but thank you so much for sharing that, or for being in your presence, in your stillness, in your capacity to give us this wonderful transmission. I'm truly grateful. Thank you so much for coming to this podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Well, thank you for the invite. Yeah.
Exactly. And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. This is something special that I would listen again. I know that Nic put me in a completely different state. As I was listening to him, I was experiencing the layers and layers and layers of my inner self, which was absolutely beautiful experience for me as well. So I hope this transmission and this soul connection will enrich your life and would elevate your presence to the next level and beyond. And I'm so grateful and happy for everybody who is tuning in and listening to us on a weekly basis. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see each other soon.